my name is Kirby Cos, and welcome to my video on how I made my Lady Nagant cosplay from My Hero Academia from start to mostly finish. This is not a tutorial, this is more of a way I documented how I made my cosplay, so do watch this at your own risk as I make a lot of mistakes. A little bit about me, I am a novice cosplayer. Only recently started making my cosplays, so this is a little bit of my first time sewing a dress and going kind of mostly from start to finish. I hope you enjoy and you learn something new. And let's get into the meat of the video now. So let's start with the dress. This was my first time making a dress, and second time using my brand new sewing machine, and so I was gonna go a little bit insane. I received the pattern from a friend who had already bought a pattern and was so kind to let me use the pattern. I will throw up onto the screen what the pattern was or where it was from, and I started using it as a way to figure out what I wanted to do. So I did some measurements of myself. I then picked out the correct sizing for the pattern, printed it out, cut it out on scrap fabric. And there was an issue with my mock-up. As you can see, this is my mock-up. There's a giant hole in it. You wanna know why? There was no stretch to my fabric. My fabric had no stretch. As you can see, I actually had to cut out in the middle there just for me to try it on to see if it would like fit otherwise, like if I could still close it and then there was any parts that I wanted to adjust anywhere. Luckily I did not, but I learned my first mistake. Use a stretchy fabric for your mock-up. I already knew I was going to use a stretchy fabric for my final. Anyways, after I learned that valuable mistake for just the top part, I then went out to my local fabric store and definitely wandered around there for maybe 20 minutes. I annoyed the heck out of my friends who would join me because I am somehow really scared of walking into a fabric store and speaking to the really kind old ladies who definitely judge me. But that's something for another day. I walked around for 20 minutes and I ended up picking up this really beautiful purple fabric. I can't tell you right now what it actually is anymore because I do not remember, but it is a 4-way stretch. I proceeded to then get too much of this. You can see there's all this extra. This is after I made my dress. So what was I thinking? I don't know. At least it's nice, good scrap fabric that is 4-way stretch that I could use for mock-ups later, or I could make another dress. So now that I had my fabric, I decided I'll start with the top. I cut out the fabric, I sewed it, and after some adjustments, I made it fit the way I wanted to. It was perfect. Except I realized I forgot about hemming. Especially where the shoulders sit, because, you know, I forgot to give myself extra fabric so that I could hem it. Now my sleeves looked a little weird, but that's okay. I said I'll move on to the skirt. It will be better elsewhere. I will learn from my mistakes and make sure there is enough fabric where I need to hem. So I moved on to the skirt. I cut out the pattern, followed the instructions, and all of a sudden, why is the circumference of my skirt not matching the circumference of my top? What happened here? Why are they different? In hindsight, what really occurred was probably when I was cutting out the fabric for the skirt or the top, I had stretched the fabric over the pattern a little too much so that one item was going to be smaller than the other, and something basically came about that. Or when I had sewed pieces together, I'd sewed a little bit more or less than the seam allowance had originally told me to, and there was going to be an issue there. That's okay. So what I did is some wizardry, I did some praying, and I attached the two pieces together. It didn't look clean, but I was like, you know what? That's okay. Lady Nagant's belt sits exactly where the connection is between the two. And I was like, that's okay. It'll just get hidden. I won't have any issues. And I was like, let's move on. And then I realized I needed to hem the bottom of the skirt, but that's okay. I already knew there's going to be lots of seam allowance on the bottom. So I decided to hang up my dress on a hanger, and then I sat on the floor and I used every pin in the house to fold up the skirt and then pin it. And then I made sure it was perfectly straight on the hanger. I sewed it together. I put it on and realized it was not straight anymore. I had not made a sewing mistake. Instead, I had made mistake number. I realized that when you want to hem the skirt, you need to wear it first, and you need to get the help of somebody else to hem and fold it up for you and pin it, because the way the fabric sits on your body is different from how it sits on a hanger. So it looked a little weird. I was upset. It took me 6 hours to fold up the skirt, hem it, sew it. So I moved on. I said I live, I learn. We always make mistakes, and I'll just move on to something else. Like I got things to do with this dress. I got places to be. So I went on to add pockets. like I said, I had already sewed the dress together, and how was I going to put a pocket in? I had to put a pocket in where I'd already sewn a seam. So I went back, I ripped up the seam, I put in a pocket, followed a tutorial, closed it, and was like, this looks okay. It's, the pockets are a little small. This is about the size of the pocket. It just fits my hand when stretched out. It's a little small. I would prefer a bit more, like my whole hand. A lot more things could fit in here. And I was like, you know, it's not as big as I'd like, but as long as it does the job and fits my phone. I'll show you what happens when I put my phone in. It sags the dress a lot! The dress is just half sagging because there's a phone in it. Because did you know when you sew with stretchy fabric and you put something heavy on the fabric, like a phone in a pocket, it's going to sag it a lot because it will just stretch. So you know what I did? Nothing. And so I moved on. I moved on again. Decided, you know what? Let's just do something basic. Let's wash the fabric. I washed it. I hung it up in the bathroom. I went to bed. Then I found that my now dry dress was longer than normal, was looking lopsided more than normal, and realized that I'd hung up my dress while it was drying. All this water that was in the dress was seeping right through it down and was stretching the fabric over hours upon hours last night. I was specifically told to wash the fabric before I cut it. At least wash it before I sew it. By 2 people. I'd like to state a formal apology to those 2 people. I am so sorry I did not listen. I only learned things the hard way, based on how many mistakes I've made in this video. And decided to get the yellow bits that are up here on Lady Nagant's skirt at the bottom. Some yellow paint. I started painting and realized the fabric was absorbing a lot of the paint. I'm learning so much. And realized this was not going to work. I'll just get yellow ribbon instead. I will instead make it will just look so much brighter. It will be consistent in color and it'll be perfect. I went out to get ribbon, I cut it out, I sewed it in, and well, as you can see, there are some issues with using a ribbon that happens to be non-stretch. I'll save you the trouble of how that went, and I'll just show you. In hindsight, what had gone wrong was that I was using a non-stretchy ribbon against a stretchy fabric. I proceeded to take none of the precautions that you would need. I don't know to this day exactly, so if anybody would be down to correct me, of how you would attach non-stretchy fabric to stretchy fabric, or now look horrible as it looks here. That'd be great, but I took none of the precautions. I especially didn't even use a zigzag stitch, so like I was just using a straight stitch. I was causing so many issues for myself. Let's look at the belt that I had made and worked on. So the belt is actually relatively easy. It's just like a lot of different shapes, and it's just a few pieces of foam, and it was honestly, it comes out really easy. Like, it's not a hard thing to make. I ended up making this thing like a week before my exam started. Don't be like me and do things before, you know, exams start, because, well, you'll just be thinking about this for multiple days as you write an exam. I drafted out the pattern, and I cut it out, and I put all the pieces together. I glued together all like the main pieces here, and the canisters were basically the last part that I needed to work with. And so this is actually the second iterations for these canisters. I'll throw up a picture of what the old canisters used to look like. I originally wanted the canisters to be able to hold chapstick or sanitizer, just little small things that would just kind of, you know, be convenient, because I tend to like to have multifunctional things in my cosplays. And so I thought the canisters were really cute and would be able to hold stuff. And so I designed them in a way so that the lids were removable. There was still a string attached to the lids so that even if they'd fallen off, I wouldn't lose them. So after one day at the con, the lids just kept falling off. And then realized, yep, I'm gonna have to come up with a brand new solution to this. And I actually used a technique that I had seen one of my fellow cosplayers on Instagram use. So their name is Wabbit-chan. They had actually made a Nagant Cosplay, and I will go further into how they helped me with my gun, because I used a lot of their references for how to make the gun. I used a really cool technique on how to do the canisters. I strapped the canisters together, so this is a piece of ribbon here, and it's a little bit hard to see. It goes right into the belt here, and then on the inside here, that's the ribbon coming through. Thread it through and then glued it down. And I did it for basically all of them. And so you can see all the ribbons there, they're glued down, and it looks a little ugly on the inside, but honestly, no one's looking at this. This isn't a competition ready cosplay, so I was like, I'm just gonna do something that works and it stays very secure and I won't have issues with it. And so this actually worked really well, and the belt was done, and I'm so happy. This probably had the least amount of issues when it came to the different parts of my cosplay. Now on to the boot covers. The boot covers that I have here is actually the second iteration of the covers. When I first made the pair, I was actually about a week away from the convention and was like, you know what, screw it, let's make the boot covers out of something extremely cheap and I'll fix it later. So I took an old cotton shirt, the kind of shirts that you get at like free events, and they say something that you really do not care and do not want to wear it in public, so you end up using it as like pajamas, but instead I threw it into my scrap fabric bin at the time. So I had used this white cotton shirt that you know, if you see at the bottom any text, you actually don't see any text. That's just your imagination. And I sewed it together, added this little drawstring to help keep the boot cover up my leg and wouldn't slide down. Ta-da, I said. It looked weird, but oh well, and went to the mostly outdoors convention. It was raining. This is cotton boot covers. It picks up a lot of water. It picked up a lot of mud. It picked up a lot of rocks. By the end of the day, I had to throw out the boot covers. I didn't even get to keep them to just use as a reference for my second iteration. I just threw them out because they were nasty, and proceeded to just not wear any boot covers with this cosplay for the next 8 months. And then I decided to go to the fabric store, and 30 minutes later, I walked out with this beautiful faux white leather. And I really love faux leather for boot covers just because they have this really nice texture and they basically look like leather and they look like boot covers, and I just really like it. This is just a very fun material to work with. It's very stiff, it's got a little bit of stretch. I just love this material. It is expensive. Luckily, this fabric was 50% off, so I only paid $16 for 60 centimeters. It's a lot of money. Can you believe this? Turns out I actually only needed 30 centimeters because the lady who was cutting the fabric, I'd given her my pattern, and I was like, I basically need 2 pairs of these boots, so 4 of these. She put them on. She was like 60 centimeters. I looked at her. I knew for the fact she was not optimizing the pattern on the fabric. It's got a weird shape at the bottom. So I'll throw up a picture of Lady Nagant's actual boots, and as you can see, there is a black part at the bottom. So normally somebody might like actually use black where it should be, but instead my boots, which I bought secondhand thankfully, were black, and I was like, oh, you know what, that's okay, I will use the original black boot underneath there as like the base for when the black appears on there. Then one night later, I did it all in one go and was like, wow, there are no cover issues with this boot cover. I used some leather paint for the black here and the gray here, and it honestly turned out really well. The boot covers is probably one of my favorite parts of the cosplay. I honestly think these are very clean, and I'm very happy with these, and I do love the way they look. If you're gonna wonder what I did with the wig, don't. I didn't style it. I kept it basically the way it was out of the bag because I thought it looked really nice and I ran with it. I didn't really do anything like crimping or any more styling after that. I think it's a big thing that people say, oh, you should not be using your wig out of the bag. But this was already pre-styled, and I did like the way it looked, and it didn't look horrible on me. It's time for the big girl, my big prop. So confession, I really only cosplayed Lady Nagant because she had a massive gun. I just really am a sucker for big weapons. This ties back to Wabbit-chan and her cosplay because I remember seeing her cosplay of Lady Nagant, and so I definitely took a lot of pictures of Wabbit-chan's cosplay on her Instagram. Her YouTube has some videos of it too, and I took a lot of photos of it. I took a lot of photos of other cosplayers as well on the internet, used it as references, and I reached out to Wabbit-chan as well and asked her like, hey, I've wanted to make this gun as well, and I'm hoping you could give me some tips on how to do it. And she was so kind. She was giving me lots of tips, and honestly, it was just very nice to speak to her. I'd never spoken to her before. I'd seen her I think once or twice at conventions too. So a lot of this gun is actually her design. This gun has an insert here for the arm. Her quirk is that a gun appears out of her elbow as she folds her arm back, and a gun peers out this way. So Wabbit-chan had designed it so that her real arm went into here and then attached a mannequin arm that went backwards to make it look like her arm was actually folding back, but she had full control of how this thing worked. I unfortunately do not have a mannequin arm. I basically did the whole thing without the arm. She was so kind and she gave me the design for this arm piece. Honestly, I messed up like the construction of it, but honestly, I'm pretty happy with how it came out. I recommend you go follow her. She's done really amazing wigs as well. I just think her props and her wig work and her just work in general is really good. She has won some awards too, so I definitely recommend watching her content or just following her. So how I constructed this. So most of this is created out of foam. We'll start with this main barrel here. It went with a very cheaply way of making my cosplay. Basically a lot of reused items. I kind of bought nothing for this gun in particular. This barrel here is actually made out of toilet roll tubes. I taped them together and I wrapped them in craft paper. I made sure to also draw on all these lines to make it look like it's more wooden, I guess. It definitely does not give that look, but it gives it a bit of texture from far away, even up close, like there's some stuff to it. I also did stuff this tube with fabric to give it a little bit of support so that if I squeezed it, it actually wouldn't collapse in on itself. There'd be fabric in there. So the fabric goes up pretty much like for a good chunk, half of it, I think. And then this spirally part here definitely gave me a lot of headaches. I did not know how to do it. I think I did a lot of like trial and error and trying to figure out how I wanted to do it. And I had this eureka moment. I decided I'd cut out some cardboard and I cut out 3 of them and I put it together and I was like, you know what? This works really well as like a skeleton almost of how I wanted it to look. And I decided, you know what, I'll use tape. So this is like masking tape, painter's tape. I use that to basically cover, almost give it like a skin to the cardboard. And I use that. And so if you look closely, like you can see some of the lines that come from the painter's tape or the tape in general. And it is a bit messy, and if you're looking up close to it, you'll see some issues, but from far away, you can't really tell. It definitely absorbed a lot of paint. It made it like crinkle in some places, and I'm not sure, maybe I should have primed it. I'm not sure how I could have avoided that, but in the end, I'm pretty happy with how this came out. It's also extremely durable, so it is light, so I can lift this. It's probably 3 to 5 pounds, and it is quite strong, so I can hold it here, wobble it, and like it won't break. I could hold it here, so often I am holding it like this, or like this at a convention. I might hold it like this. I do find that my hand gets quite warm in here because it is 6mm foam, so it is going to like trap a lot of heat. Anyways, that is how I made my Lady Nagant cosplay. It honestly took about 9 to 10 months to make, mainly because I took a break halfway through to do university and all that fun stuff that comes with, you know, being an adult sometimes. I hope you learned something or this was entertaining to watch. This is my first video. I just wanted to like sometimes speak to the camera and just yap about like the kind of things that go through my head, like my process, because it's sometimes really weird, especially when I tackle cosplay with the lens of trying to be cheap and sustainable and reuse materials instead of sometimes using the more sturdy and they will last longer, and instead I try to use things that are around the house and I try to keep costs down because cosplay can be expensive and I would love to continue doing this hobby for a long time. I want to make sure it's sustainable to mostly my wallet, but also like my own peace of mind, because I find that people get really excited to know how much money this came out to be. So I'll throw up onto the screen the total cost of this cosplay, the breakdown of what everything cost. Hopefully it's helpful to you. I do hope to make more videos about my cosplays and my processes and how I make them, as well as maybe more vlogs on the conventions I go to, sometimes the competitions that I attend, and see from there. Thank you!